A powerful businessman is convinced that success is measured solely by wealth. His worldview is challenged when a young woman from humble beginnings shows surprising insight. What she reveals forces him to confront his beliefs and change his perspective on life. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching us from. We're moving on. I promise this will be the best story you'll ever hear in your life. The morning sun flooded the penthouse of the tallest building on Fifth Avenue with a golden light that seemed to bless only the chosen ones. From the 43rd floor, New York City stretched out like a carpet of concrete and glass at the feet of Richard Harrison, a man who firmly believed the world revolved around him. And perhaps at least in that corporate universe of astronomical figures and destiny-changing decisions, he was right. Richard was 51 years old, with perfectly combed silver hair, Italian suits that cost more than an economy car, and a gaze that could make any executive tremble. He had built a tech empire from scratch, or at least that was the story he liked to tell. Harrison Tech dominated the American market for corporate software and was rapidly expanding into Europe. The numbers were impressive. The financial newspaper headlines always highlighted his name, and Entrepreneur of the Year awards piled up on his Carrara marble bookshelf. But there was something the magazine articles didn't mention. Richard Harrison wasn't just a successful man. He was a hollow man, empty inside, who had traded any shred of humanity for a 9-figure bank account. For him, the world was divided into two very simple categories, winners and losers, and he obviously was at the top of the pyramid, looking down on everyone else. On that Thursday in March, Richard woke up as usual at 5:30 in the morning. His penthouse apartment atop the Harrison Tech building was a masterpiece of minimalist design and discreet ostentation. Black marble floors imported from Italy, immaculate white walls decorated with contemporary artworks worth fortunes, and furniture by European designers whose names no one could pronounce. The panoramic view of Manhattan was breathtaking, especially at dawn, when the city still slept, and he could feel literally above everyone. After his meticulously planned morning routine, which included an hour in the private gym installed in his own apartment, a breakfast prepared by his personal chef, and reading the major financial newspapers, Richard went down to his office on the 42nd floor. The private elevator took him directly, without stops, without contact with ordinary employees. That was how he liked it. Isolated, untouchable, superior. The presidential suite was an extension of his personality, enormous, intimidating, designed to make any visitor feel small. The solid rosewood desk was the size of a dining table and was always impeccably organized. Behind it, a shelf held books on economics and management that he had never read, but which provided an air of intellectuality. On the walls were framed diplomas, award certificates, and photographs of him shaking hands with politicians and celebrities. Richard sat in his imported leather armchair and turned on his computer. His schedule for the day was packed, with important meetings. First stop, a video conference with international investors. Then a meeting with the board to discuss staff cuts. Yes, cuts. After all, the last quarter's profits had been merely excellent, not extraordinary. And for Richard, excellent was not enough. While reviewing spreadsheets and charts, his secretary, Margaret, entered the room discreetly. She was a woman in her late 40s, efficient and invisible, exactly the way Richard liked his employees to be. "Good morning, Mr. Harrison. Just a reminder that today is Thursday, deep cleaning day for the office." Richard barely looked up from the screen. "And why? Do I need to know this?" "The cleaning crew will need access to your office. Usually you are in external meetings at this time, but today, have them do the work and not disturb me. I'll be here all day. They have 30 minutes when I leave for lunch. Not a minute more." Margaret nodded and left quickly. Richard returned his attention to the numbers on the screen, completely uninterested in anything that didn't involve profits and acquisitions. Later, around 11 o'clock, when Richard was in a tedious video conference with suppliers, there was a discreet knock on the door. He ignored it. The knock repeated, more insistent. With an irritated sigh, Richard muted his microphone. "Come in!" he shouted, not hiding the annoyance in his voice. The door opened and a woman entered, pushing a cleaning cart. It was Catherine, the supervisor of the cleaning team. Richard knew her vaguely, just another face among the many who worked in the building without him bothering to know them. Catherine was around 38 years old, with a tired face marked by hard work, but kind eyes that still held hope despite life's difficulties. "Sorry to bother you, Mr. Harrison. It's just that today is deep cleaning day, and I know what day it is. Margaret already told me, but I'm in a meeting, as you can see." "Yes, sir, I understand. It's just that if we don't do it today, it will delay the whole schedule and—" Richard interrupted her with an impatient wave of his hand. "I'm not interested in your schedule. Come back later." Catherine hesitated, her fingers nervously gripping the broom handle. "Will you be going out for lunch, sir?" "I will. At noon. You have half an hour. Is that enough?" "Yes, sir. Thank you, sir." She started to leave but stopped when a child's voice came from the hallway. "Mom, where do I put this?" Richard frowned. "Is there a child in the hallway?" Catherine became visibly nervous. "It's my daughter, sir. Lily. Her school went on break for building renovations. I had no one to leave her with, and you thought it was appropriate to bring a child into a corporate environment?" Richard's voice was sharp as a blade. "Sir, I'm so sorry. She won't get in the way, I promise. She'll stay quiet, helping with simple things. I had no other option. And I couldn't miss work because you need the job. Yes, I understand how the world works, Catherine." Richard leaned back in his chair, a cruel smile playing on his lips. "And do you understand that if your daughter causes any problem, any delay, any inconvenience, there will be consequences?" Catherine lowered her head. "Yes, sir. I understand." "Great. Now leave and let me work." Catherine left quickly, closing the door carefully. From the hallway, Richard could still hear her speaking quietly to her daughter. "Come, sweetheart, let's go to another floor." Richard returned to his video conference already, completely forgetting the small incident. To him, those people were just part of the landscape, interchangeable parts in the great machine that kept his empire running. He had no time or interest in knowing their stories, their problems, their lives. At noon, Richard left for lunch at an exclusive restaurant 2 blocks from the office. As always, he was received with bows and special attention. He sat at his favorite table, from where he could see the movement of Fifth Avenue, and ordered his usual dish while checking emails on his phone. The lunch cost more than Catherine earned in a week of work, but that never crossed Richard's mind. When he returned to the office 40 minutes later, he found his room impeccable. The smell of cleaning products hung in the air, the windows sparkled, every object was perfectly positioned. Catherine had met the deadline. Richard didn't even notice. To him, that was the bare minimum expected. The rest of the day followed in a succession of meetings, calls, and decisions. Richard approved the layoff of 50 employees from the Chicago branch, rejected a salary increase request from the IT department, and signed a contract that would increase his personal profits by a few million. It was just another day in the life of a man who measured success in dollar signs. At 7 in the evening, when most employees had already gone home, Richard was still in his office. He liked that time of day, when the building became silent and he could feel the weight of his power. He owned that space, those lives, that small corporate universe. That was when he heard voices in the hallway. Irritated by the interruption of his moment of solitary reflection, Richard opened the door abruptly. Catherine was there collecting the last trash bags of the day, and beside her, sitting on the floor with a notebook on her lap, was the girl, Lily. "Still here?" Richard asked, his voice echoing in the empty hallway. Catherine stood up quickly, startled. "Mr. Harrison, sorry, we're just finishing up, just a few more minutes, and I didn't ask how long you'll take. I asked why you were still here at this hour." "It's just, we have to clean all the floors, sir, and with Lily here, I ended up taking a bit longer." Richard looked at the girl. She was 12 years old, with tan skin and brown hair tied in a simple ponytail. She wore a faded school uniform and old sneakers, but what caught Richard's attention were her eyes. There was something in them, an intelligence, a curiosity that didn't match the setting of poverty she represented. "And what is she doing, playing while you work?" "She's studying, sir, doing her homework." Richard let out a humorless laugh. Studying. How adorable. He walked over to where Lily was sitting. The girl looked at him but didn't look away, which irritated Richard even more. "What are you studying, girl?" "Lily, sir." "My name is Lily." Catherine turned pale. "Lily, don't be rude." No, let her speak." Richard crossed his arms, amused by the situation. "Go on, Lily. What are you studying?" "I'm doing a project on different writing systems, alphabets different from our own." Richard arched an eyebrow. "How interesting. A public school girl studying alphabets. Very ambitious." His tone was clearly mocking. Lily closed her notebook and stood up. She was short and thin, but there was something in her posture that bothered Richard. The teacher said it's important to know other cultures, that the world is bigger than we imagine. How wise, your teacher. Richard smiled cruelly. "And what exactly do you think you'll use that knowledge for? Are you going to travel the world? Work at the UN?" He let out a loud laugh. "Or are you going to follow in your mother's footsteps, cleaning offices?" "Richard," Catherine began, tears in her eyes. "Mr. Harrison," he corrected her coldly. "Mr. Harrison, please. She's just a child. A child who needs to learn how the world really works. It's no use filling these kids' heads with impossible dreams. She needs to understand her place." Lily looked at Richard with an expression he couldn't decipher. It wasn't fear, it wasn't anger. It was something deeper, more disturbing. "And what is my place, sir?" The question took Richard by surprise. "What? You said I need to understand my place. What is it?" Richard laughed, but there was something uncomfortable in that laugh. "Your place is the same as your mother's, working hard, earning little, serving people like me. It's the natural order of things. Some are born to lead, others to obey." "And were you born to lead?" "Obviously. I am living proof that intelligence and determination lead to success. I built all of this alone." He pointed to the luxurious office around them. "Alone?" Lily tilted her head. "Who cleans this office? Who cooks your food? Who built this building? Who programs the computers your company sells?" Catherine grabbed her daughter's arm. "Lily, that's enough. Sorry, Mr. Harrison, she didn't mean to be disrespectful. We're leaving now." But Richard raised his hand, preventing them from leaving. There was something about that girl that intrigued and irritated him at the same time. How did she dare question him? How did she have the courage to look him in the eye like that? No, let her finish, I'm curious." He leaned toward Lily, his face close to hers. "Continue. Enlighten me with your childish wisdom." Lily didn't flinch. "I just think nobody does anything alone. My mom always says we're all connected, that every person matters no matter what they do." How lovely, very poetic, but completely irrelevant in the real world. Richard straightened up, tired of the conversation. In the real world, there are people who have value and people who don't. And value is measured by what you can buy, by the power you have, that is all. "So you think my mother has no value?" The question came so directly, so charged with genuine emotion, that Richard hesitated for a second, but only a second. "Your mother has the value of any competent employee. She does her job, she receives her salary. It's a fair exchange." "But it's not fair." Lily's voice trembled slightly. "My mother works 12 hours a day. She cleans other people's dirt. She comes home with her back aching and still takes care of me and my brother. She is the strongest person I know, and you think she has no value." "I'm sure she is a wonderful mother, but that doesn't change the fact that she is replaceable. There are thousands of people who could do her job. But how many people could do my job? How many people have the vision, the intelligence, the ability to build an empire like mine?" Lily was silent for a moment, her eyes fixed on Richard's. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft but firm. "Maybe many people could do your job, sir, but nobody can be my mother except her, and that to me is worth more than all the money in the world." For the first time in many years, Richard Harrison was speechless. There was something in that answer, in that simple truth spoken by a 12-year-old girl, that bothered him deeply. He felt a strange pang in his chest, something he no longer recognized. Was it guilt, shame, impossible? "Catherine, take your daughter home, and tomorrow Leave her with someone. I don't want children circulating through the office during working hours. Is that clear? Yes, sir. Very clear. Sorry again. Catherine took Lily by the hand and began to walk away quickly. But before disappearing into the hallway, Lily looked back one last time. And in that look, Richard saw something that disturbed him even more. It wasn't pity, it wasn't anger. It was understanding. As if that girl could see right through him, through all the layers of arrogance and wealth, straight into the void inside. Richard went back into his office and closed the door harder than he intended. He sat heavily in his armchair and looked at the lit-up city outside. New York sparkled as always, indifferent to the small human dramas unfolding within its concrete guts. He tried to go back to work, but he couldn't. Concentrate. Lily's words echoed in his mind. Nobody can be my mother except her, and that is worth more than all the money in the world. Richard shook his head, irritated with himself. Why was he giving importance to the words of a child? What did she know about the world, about success, about power? Nothing. She was just another poor girl with foolish dreams and a romanticized view of reality. But even so, as the sky darkened and the city continued its frantic dance of lights and movement, Richard couldn't get that encounter out of his head. There was something different about that girl, something that bothered him, something that made him question, even if only for an instant, all the certainties upon which he had built his life. And maybe, just maybe, that was the first step of a journey that would change everything. But Richard Harrison didn't know that yet. That night he returned to his luxurious penthouse, ate dinner alone as he always did, and slept in his imported king-size bed, surrounded by all the symbols of his success. And if, in the darkness of that night, he dreamed of a girl with intelligent eyes and words that cut like knives, he didn't remember it when he woke up, or at least he pretended not to remember. Friday dawned cloudy in New York, with that typical grey March sky that threatened rain but never quite decided. Richard woke up with a strange feeling, a discomfort he couldn't identify. He had slept poorly, waking up several times during the night for no apparent reason. His thoughts kept returning to the previous day's encounter, to that girl and her disturbing words. While eating his meticulously prepared breakfast, Richard tried to push those thoughts away. It was ridiculous to give so much importance to an insignificant conversation with a child. He had much more important things to worry about. The company was negotiating a multi-million-dollar merger with a Canadian firm, there were German investors arriving next week, and the launch of the new software was scheduled for next month. These were the issues that deserved his attention. But as much as he tried to concentrate on numbers and strategies, his mind insisted on returning to Lily. The way she had looked at him without fear, without the subservience he was used to seeing in people's eyes. The way she had defended her mother with such conviction. And that final sentence, that damn sentence that refused to leave his head. Richard shook his head with irritation and put on one of his most expensive suits. Today would be a productive day. He wouldn't allow a child's daydreams to get in the way of his plans. In the office, the morning passed in a succession of meetings and video conferences. Richard was in his element, commanding, deciding, dominating every conversation with his intimidating presence. That was what he did best. That was what gave meaning to his life. Around 11 o'clock, during a brief break between meetings, Richard went to the coffee machine on the executive floor. While waiting for the drink to be ready, he heard female voices talking in the break room next door. "Did you hear what happened with Catherine yesterday?" It was Margaret's voice, his secretary. "The cleaning lady, what was it?" Another voice, which Richard recognized as Patricia's from the Human Resources Department. Apparently her daughter had a run-in with the big boss, and he wasn't kind at all as usual. Richard stopped, his hand suspended in the air, about to grab the coffee cup. He knew he should walk away, that eavesdropping was beneath his dignity. But something kept him there, motionless, listening. "Oh no, poor thing. Catherine already goes through so much. Her husband left her 2 years ago. She's raising 2 kids alone, works 12 hours a day. And now she has to endure humiliation too. Yeah, and the girl Lily is a sweetheart. Super smart. Always has a book under her arm. Catherine is always saying her daughter is a genius, that she gets top grades in school. It must be hard for her, wanting to give her kids a better future but not having the means. And the worst part is that Mr. Harrison seems to enjoy it, like it's a game for him, humiliating the humblest employees. There was a heavy silence, and then Margaret sighed. Sometimes I wonder how someone can have so much money and so little heart. Richard felt a wave of anger rise in his chest. How did they dare talk about him like that? He was their boss, the one responsible for their jobs, for the food on their tables, and yet they had the audacity to judge him. He grabbed the coffee cup tightly and returned to his office, slamming the door. He sat in his chair and stared at the city outside, anger boiling in his veins. But along with the anger, there was something else, a nagging sensation, a discomfort he didn't want to name. Did people really see him that way, as a heartless man? And why did that bother him so much? He had never cared about others' opinions before. Why was it different now? The afternoon dragged on in a haze of meetings and decisions. Richard was irritable, impatient, harsher than usual with his subordinates. 2 people left. His office in tears after severe reprimands. A manager nearly resigned after Richard humiliated him in front of the whole team for a minor error in a presentation. At 6 in the evening, when most employees were already leaving, Richard was still in his office. He should have been satisfied. He had closed 2 important contracts, approved a cost-cutting measure that would increase next quarter's profits, and secured a vantage point in an international negotiation. But instead of satisfaction, all he felt was an uncomfortable emptiness. That was when he heard the sound of the cleaning cart in the hallway. His body tensed. Would it be Catherine? And if so, would Lily be with her again? He had been clear about not wanting children in the office. If Catherine disobeyed his orders, there would be consequences. Richard opened the door abruptly, ready to scold. But the person there was an older man, Joseph, another cleaning staff member. There was no sign of Catherine or Lily. "Mr. Harrison, good evening, sir. May I clean your office?" "Is Catherine not working today?" Joseph seemed surprised by the question. Richard never showed interest in the cleaning staff. "She is, sir. She's on the 20th floor. She asked me to cover this floor today." "Why?" "Oh, I'm not exactly sure, sir. I think she wanted to avoid—" "Well, it doesn't matter. I'll clean your office quickly and won't disturb you." Richard nodded impatiently and went back inside, but left the door open. While Joseph worked silently, Richard pretended to be focused on the computer, but his mind was elsewhere. Catherine was avoiding crossing paths with him, probably afraid of losing her job, or perhaps embarrassed by her daughter's behavior. But was it the daughter who behaved badly? A nagging voice inside his head asked. Or was it you? Richard closed his eyes tightly, trying to quiet that voice. When he opened them again, Joseph had finished and was leaving discreetly. "Good night, Mr. Harrison. God bless you." "Wait." Richard didn't know why he was saying it. "Catherine, is she a good employee?" Joseph seemed even more surprised. "Catherine, sir, she's the best we have. Hard-working, dedicated, never misses a day, never complains. And she coordinates the whole team. If it weren't for her, this building wouldn't shine so bright." "Does she have 2 children?" "She does, sir. Lily and Peter. A mischievous boy, but a good heart. And the girl, she's special. I've seen many rich kids out there who don't have half the intelligence of that child." "Intelligent how?" Joseph leaned against the cart, excited by the chance to talk. "Sir, the girl speaks 3 languages, English, Spanish, and French. And she's learning Mandarin on her own, using internet videos at the public library. And she's only 12. And that's not all. She helps other kids in the neighborhood with their homework, organizes reading circles in the community. Catherine is always saying her daughter is going to be someone in life." Richard felt something strange in his chest. "And how did she learn all that? Does the family have resources for classes?" Joseph laughed humorlessly. "Resources, sir. Catherine can barely pay the rent. Lily learns everything on her own. Public library, internet when she can access it, volunteer teachers. The girl has a hunger for knowledge. Says she's going to study hard and one day get her mother out of that life." There was genuine pride in Joseph's voice when he spoke of Lily, and something in that bothered Richard deeply. "She thinks studying will change her life." "It will, sir. Education is the only thing that can change the fate of a poor person. Everyone knows that. It's not always enough. Joseph looked at him with an expression hard to decipher. Maybe not, sir, but it's all they have. And Lily, she believes. And when you're 12 years old and live in a 2-room apartment in the Bronx, belief is what keeps you alive. Richard didn't answer. Joseph gave a slight bow and left, pushing his cart. The office became silent again, but now it seemed emptier than ever. For the first time in many years, Richard didn't want to stay late working. He grabbed his things and went down to the underground garage where his Mercedes was waiting. The driver stood up quickly when he saw him approach. "Home, Mr. Harrison?" "No. I want to take a drive first. Just drive around the city." The driver seemed confused but didn't question him. They headed out into the streets of New York, now illuminated by night lights. Richard looked out the window, observing the city in a different way. He had always seen New York as his kingdom, his empire, but now for the first time he was really seeing the people on the streets. A street vendor on the corner selling hot dogs to earn a few cents. An entire family squeezed into a bus stop, waiting for the transport that would take them to distant outskirts. Tired workers returning home after long shifts. Children playing on the sidewalks, their laughter echoing in the night despite the poverty around them. "Sir, is everything okay?" The driver looked at him through the rearview mirror, worried. "Take me to the Bronx. I want to see where Catherine lives." "Sir?" "You heard me. Look up the address in the employee records." 30 minutes later, the Mercedes stopped on a narrow street in a peripheral neighborhood. The houses were simple. Some were just weathered apartments. Children were still playing in the streets despite the hour. Music played loudly from some windows. The smell of food being prepared hung in the air. Richard looked around, feeling completely out of place in his designer suit inside that luxury car. People on the street looked at the vehicle with curiosity and suspicion. Some young men approached, but the driver accelerated gently, moving away. "This is Catherine's address, sir, that blue building over there." It was a small, poorly painted building, with windows that had gaps through which one could see the light inside. But there were flower pots in the window, and the entrance was clean. Through a simple curtain, Richard could see shadows moving. Catherine and her children, probably. He imagined her routine, waking up before dawn to take 2 buses to Manhattan, working 12 hours cleaning the dirt of rich people, returning home exhausted and still having to take care of children, prepare food, help with homework, and then waking up the next day and doing it all over again, every day, without a break, without a real vacation, without hope for change. And Lily, growing up in that environment, still finding the strength to study, to dream, to believe she could be more. Where did that strength come from? "Let's go," Richard said abruptly. "Take me home." That night, in his luxurious penthouse, Richard couldn't sleep. He stood on the balcony looking at the city lights, thinking about all the people down there. Every light was a life, a story, a dream. And he had never stopped to think about that before. His entire life had been built on the certainty that he was superior, that he deserved to be at the top because he was smarter, more determined, stronger. But what if he was wrong? What if the only difference between him and Catherine was the place where they were born? And what if Lily, with all the opportunities he had, could have gone even further? Saturday passed in a strange haze. Richard tried to follow his normal routine, but everything felt different. The food prepared by his private chef seemed tasteless. The expensive objects around him seemed empty of meaning. Even the magnificent view from his penthouse seemed less impressive. He found himself thinking about Lily studying at the public library because she didn't have internet at home, learning languages on her own because she had a hunger for knowledge. And then he thought of himself, surrounded by books he never read, with access to any course or education he wanted, but without curiosity to learn anything that didn't generate direct profit. On Sunday, Richard did something he hadn't done in years. He went for a walk in the city. No driver, no bodyguards, just him and the streets of New York. He passed a public library and stopped to observe. There were dozens of people inside, most clearly poor, but all with that same expression he had seen in Lily. Hunger, not for food, but for knowledge, for possibilities, for hope. He entered the library. The place was simple, with old furniture and worn books. But there was life there. Children reading in circles on the floor, adults studying at shared tables, seniors carefully browsing books, and in the corner, on a bulletin board, there were flyers offering free classes in various languages taught by volunteers. Richard picked up one of the flyers. Basic Mandarin, Saturdays at 10 a.m. Teacher, Anna Huang. Volunteer, did Lily come to these classes? Was this Anna Huang one of the people who fed that girl's dreams? He stayed there for over an hour, just observing, and for the first time in decades, Richard Harrison felt small, not in a financial or power sense, but in a human sense. All those people with so little still found the strength to help each other, to share knowledge, to build community. And he, with so much, had never given anything to anyone. On Monday, Richard arrived at the office with a strange determination. He didn't know exactly what he wanted to do, but he knew something had to change. During the morning, he tried to work normally, but his thoughts kept wandering. Around noon, he called Margaret into his office. "I need some information. Catherine, from the cleaning crew. How much does she earn?" Margaret seemed surprised, but quickly checked the records. $1,800 a month, sir." Richard felt like he had been punched. $1,800. He spent more than that on a single shirt. Catherine supported an entire family, paid rent, food, transport, everything, with $1,800 a month. And she still managed to keep her children in school. "And how long has she worked here?" 7 years, sir." 7 years, Richard repeated, more to himself. "And when was her last raise?" 3 years ago, sir. A 5% adjustment. 5% in 3 years. Richard felt something burn in his chest. Shame. It was shame. "Margaret, organize a meeting with Catherine. For today, at 3 in the afternoon. Here in my office." "Sir." Margaret was visibly confused. "Did she do something wrong?" "No. Just organize it." The rest of the day passed slowly. Richard reviewed Catherine's records. 7 years of impeccable work. Never a complaint. Never. An unjustified absence. Evaluations always excellent. And all she had received in return was a miserable salary and humiliation. At 3 o'clock, there was a timid knock on the door. "Come in," Richard said, trying to keep his voice neutral. Catherine entered, visibly nervous. She wore her cleaning uniform and her hands were shaking slightly. "You called for me, Mr. Harrison?" "Sit down, Catherine." "I prefer to stand, sir. My uniform is dirty and I don't want to—" "Sit down," Richard repeated more gently this time. "Please." Catherine sat on the edge of the chair as if ready to run, at any moment. Her eyes were fixed on the floor and Richard could see the fear in them. Fear of being fired, fear of losing the livelihood of her children, and all because of the conversation Lily had with him. Richard took a deep breath. This was harder than any negotiation he had ever done. "Catherine, I wanted to talk about what happened on Thursday, with your daughter." Catherine turned even paler. "Sir, I apologize. Lily shouldn't have spoken that way. I've already talked to her and I guarantee it won't happen again. Please don't fire me. I need this job. My children—" "I'm not going to fire you, Catherine," Richard said quickly, surprising himself as much as her. "In fact, I wanted to apologize." Catherine slowly raised her eyes, incredulous. "What?" "I said terrible things to you and your daughter, things that have no excuse, and I've been thinking a lot about that over the last few days." Richard paused, struggling to find the right words. He had never apologized for anything in his adult life. "Your daughter made me think about many things, about who I've become." Catherine continued looking at him, unable to believe what she was hearing. Tears began to form in her eyes. "You've worked here for 7 years, and I never even knew your name until this week. I never asked about your life, about your family. I never recognized the value of your work, and that is wrong, very wrong." "Sir, I don't understand. I've been thinking a lot these days, and I realized your daughter was right. I have been a terrible man, not just to you, but to so many other people. I built an empire, but somewhere along the way I lost my humanity." Tears were now running, as were freely down Catherine's face. "Sir," Let me finish, please. Richard stood up and walked to the window, unable to look at her while he spoke. Your daughter, Lily. She's special. You know that. I know, sir. She is my light, my reason to keep going. She told me something I can't get out of my head. She said nobody can be her mother except you, and that is worth more than all the money in the world. Richard turned to Catherine. She's right. And I've spent my whole life measuring people's value in money. What kind of man did that? Make me? Catherine didn't answer. She just cried silently, her hands clenched in her lap. I want to change, Catherine. I don't know how yet, but I want to change, and I want to start by doing what's right. Richard went back to his desk and picked up an envelope he had prepared. This is a new contract for you, a 200% salary increase, and a new position as General Coordinator of the cleaning staff with full benefits. Catherine took the envelope with trembling hands and opened it. When she saw the numbers, she let out a sob. Sir, I can't accept this. It's too much. It's not nearly enough to make up for 7 years of hard work and loyalty, but it's a start. Catherine stood up, still holding the envelope. Why are you doing this? Richard thought about the question. Why was he doing this? Because a 12-year-old girl had managed to do in 5 minutes what no one else had managed in decades. Because he had finally looked beyond his own navel and seen the suffering around him. Because he was tired of being the empty man he had become. Because your daughter made me see that I was wrong. About everything, he said simply. Catherine took a step forward, and to Richard's complete surprise, hugged him. It was a quick hug, full of gratitude and emotion, and when she pulled away, both had tears in their eyes. Thank you, sir, thank you. You don't know what this means to me, to my children. I think I'm starting to understand. After Catherine left, Richard was alone in his office again, but this time the void was no longer there. Or at least it was a little smaller. He had taken the first step. A small step, but a step in the right direction. And as the sun set over New York, painting the sky in oranges and pinks, Richard Harrison felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Maybe there was still time for him to become a better man. Maybe there was still time to fix some of the damage he had caused. It was just the beginning. But it was a beginning. The following weeks brought subtle but noticeable changes in Richard Harrison's behavior. He began arriving at the office earlier, and instead of immediately locking himself in his room, he spent a few minutes talking to the security guards, asking about their families, their days. At first they were suspicious, expecting some kind of trap. But gradually they realized the change was genuine, albeit hesitant. Catherine now worked in a small office on the 15th floor, coordinating the cleaning team for the entire building. She still couldn't completely believe the turnaround in her life. The new salary allowed her to enroll Lily in an advanced English course and buy new books for the girl. For the first time in years, Catherine could sleep without the constant weight of financial worry crushing her chest. But the news of Catherine's promotion caused unexpected waves in the office. Some employees celebrated the change, seeing it as a sign that Richard was becoming more human. Others, especially among the high-ranking executives, became suspicious and even resentful. How could a simple cleaning lady have access to benefits many of them didn't have? It was on a Tuesday in April that Richard faced the first real resistance to his transformation. He was in a board meeting when Paul Miller, the chief financial officer, brought up the subject. Richard, we need to talk about this situation with the cleaning employee. Paul was a man in his 50s, pudgy, with a thin mustache and a perpetually cynical expression. He had been with the company since the beginning and considered himself Richard's right-hand man. Catherine. Her name is Catherine, Richard corrected, without taking his eyes off the reports in front of him. Right, Catherine. Look, I understand you want to be charitable, but a 200% raise? This creates a dangerous precedent. The rest of the cleaning staff are already asking for raises, and it's not just them. The people in IT, accounting, everyone is questioning. Why she deserves special treatment? Richard raised his eyes slowly. She deserves it because she worked here for 7 years with a ridiculous salary, because she does her job excellently, because she supports 2 children alone. Do I need to go on? But Richard, intervened Beatrice, the HR director, an elegant woman in her late 40s, Paul has a point. From a people management perspective, this can be seen as favoritism. It can cause morale problems. Favoritism. Richard leaned back in his chair, feeling the familiar anger begin to bubble. But this time it was a different anger. Not against his subordinates questioning his authority, but against the system he himself had created. Let's talk about favoritism then. How many of you in this room earned bonuses last quarter? There was an uncomfortable silence. All of you. Bonuses that, in some cases, were larger than Catherine's annual salary, and no one questioned if that was favoritism. No one asked if you deserved it. But when I decide to pay a fair wage to someone who works 12 hours a day cleaning the dirt you leave behind, suddenly it's a problem. It's not the same thing, Paul insisted. We have degrees, experience, responsibilities. And she has 2 children to feed, Paul. She has bills to pay. She has dignity that deserves to be respected. Or do you think a person's value is measured only by the diploma hanging on the wall? Paul turned red. I didn't say that. Then what are you saying? That some people deserve to live in poverty because they were born in the wrong circumstances? The tension in the room was palpable. Beatrice tried to smooth over the situation. Richard, no one is saying that. We are just concerned about the implications. If other employees start asking for similar raises, then we will give raises to those who deserve them. Review the salaries of the entire cleaning crew, security, maintenance. I want everyone to receive at least 50% more than what they are getting now. There was a chorus of protests, but Richard raised his hand, silencing them. This company profited $120 million last year. $120 million. And you are here complaining about paying a fair wage to the people who keep this place running. Do you hear yourselves? Richard, have you lost your mind? Paul exploded. What is happening to you? Last week you were talking about creating a scholarship program. Now you want to give across-the-board raises. You're throwing money away. No, Paul. For the first time in my life, I am investing in people. And if you can't see the difference, maybe you need to reevaluate your own values. The meeting ended in a tense atmosphere. Richard knew he had created enemies within his own company. But strangely, it didn't bother him as much as it should have. For the first time, he was acting according to principles, not just profits, and that brought a sense of lightness he hadn't expected. That afternoon, Richard decided to visit the public library where Lily studied. He wanted to better understand her world, to see with his own eyes what fed that hunger for knowledge. The New York Public Library was busy when he arrived. Children, teenagers, adults, and seniors occupied the tables and chairs, all immersed in books and studies. Richard walked through the aisles, observing. There was a bulletin board with ads for free classes, reading groups, writing workshops. Volunteers offered their time to teach languages, math, computers. In a room at the back, Richard found one. Of the Mandarin classes. The teacher was an elderly woman, white hair tied in a bun, thin-rimmed glasses. She was writing Chinese characters on the whiteboard while explaining their meanings to a group of about 15 people. Among them, Richard recognized Lily. He stood at the door, watching. The girl was completely absorbed, her eyes shining with concentration. She took notes carefully in a well-used notebook, asking intelligent questions that impressed even the teacher. When the class ended, Richard waited outside. Lily was one of the last to leave, talking animatedly with the teacher about the structure of some characters. When she finally turned and saw Richard, she stopped abruptly. "Mr. Harrison," she said, surprised but not intimidated. "Lily, can I talk to you for a minute?" The girl looked around as if seeking an exit, but then nodded. They walked to a nearby bench and sat down. For a long moment, neither of them said anything. "Your mother told me about the classes," Richard finally began, "that you come here every Saturday." "Yes, Mrs. Huang is a very good teacher. She lived in China for 20 years. "Why Mandarin? It's a difficult language." Lily shrugged. "That's why I like challenges. And also because," she hesitated, "because if I want to work in international companies one day, I need to know important languages. Mandarin is the future." Richard felt something tighten in his chest. That 12-year-old girl had more vision for the future than many of his executives. Lily, I wanted to apologize for what I said to you and your mother. It was cruel and unjust. You already apologized to my mother, she told me, and about the promotion too. Lily looked him directly in the eyes. Why are you doing this? Doing what? Changing. People don't change like that out of nowhere, especially people like you. People like me? Rich people, powerful people, people who are used to having everything their way. Richard laughed humorlessly. You're 12 years old and already wiser than I will ever be. I'm not wise, I just observe people. And you look different now, confused maybe, as if you're discovering something new. I am. I'm discovering that I spent my whole life being completely wrong, and you were the one who showed me that. Lily was silent for a moment. You know what's funny? I spent so much time being angry at people like you, people who have everything and value nothing, who look at people like me and my mum as if we were invisible. I swore I would never be like that. And you won't be. You are special, Lily. You have a rare talent, an exceptional intelligence. But more than that, you have empathy, you have heart. That is more valuable than any diploma or bank account. But it doesn't pay the bills, Lily said, with a sadness that shouldn't exist in a 12-year-old child. No, it doesn't. But it should. And maybe, if people like me change, if more people recognize the real value of things, one day it will. Richard took a deep breath. Lily, I want to do something. I want to create a scholarship program for children like you, with talent and will, but without resources. Would you help me with that? Lily's eyes widened. Me? How? By telling me what you need, what is missing, what would make a difference in your life and the lives of other children like you. Lily was silent for a long time, thinking. When she finally spoke, her voice was thick with emotion. Computers, internet access at home, new books, teachers who believe in us, a safe place to study, mentors who can guide us, hope that studying really will change something. Hope, Richard repeated. Is that what's missing? For a lot of people, yes. I have hope because my mom always believed in me. But I know so many smart, talented kids who gave up because no one ever believed in them, because everyone only saw the poverty, not the potential. Richard felt tears sting his eyes. When was the last time he had cried? He didn't even remember. Then let's give them hope. Let's create a program that really makes a difference, not just money thrown at pretty projects on paper. Something real, effective, that changes lives. Lily looked at him with a mixture of hope and skepticism. Are you really going to do this? You won't give up when it gets hard? I won't give up, I promise. Rich people's promises aren't worth much, she said, but there was a small smile on her lips. Then give me the chance to prove that mine are. In the following weeks, Richard plunged into the project with an intensity that surprised even himself. He hired a team, specialized in education, visited public schools, talked to teachers, parents, and students, and most importantly, he listened. He discovered that the American educational system was full of holes that poor children fell through easily. He discovered that talent had nothing to do with social class, but opportunity had everything to do with it. He discovered there were thousands of Lilies out there just waiting for a chance. The program began to take shape. It was called Bridges to the Future and would offer full scholarships, including school supplies, uniforms, transport, meals, and psychological support. But more than that, it would create a network of volunteer mentors, successful people in various fields, who would commit to guiding and inspiring the scholarship recipients. Richard also began frequenting the public library, offering himself as a volunteer. At first, people were suspicious. What was a billionaire doing there, teaching basic math to underprivileged children? But gradually, they saw he was sincere, that he really wanted to help. It was during one of these tutoring sessions that Richard met Amir. He was helping a group of children with a geometry problem when a man of about 40 approached. "Excuse me, sir. I couldn't help but notice. Your explanation. Very good, very clear." The man had a slight Arabic accent, kind eyes, and a warm smile. Thank you. I'm Richard. He extended his hand. Amir Al-Fayed. I'm a teacher here. Math and physics. They talked for a few minutes after the class, and Richard discovered Amir's story. He had been a university professor in Syria, teaching quantum physics at one of the country's best universities. But when the situation in his country became untenable, he was forced to flee with his family. He arrived in America as a refugee without a penny, without speaking English, without any prospects. And now I teach basic math in a public library, Amir said with a sad smile. My Syrian degree isn't recognized here. It would take years and a lot of money to revalidate. So I work where I can, help who I can, and try not to think too much about what I lost. But you keep teaching, Richard observed, even without being paid, even without recognition. Teaching isn't about money, Mr. Harrison. It's about passing knowledge along. It's about seeing the light turn on in a child's eyes when they finally understand something. That is priceless. Richard was silent, processing those words. Here was a man who had lost everything, his country, his career, his status, and yet he found purpose in teaching poor children for free, kids who could never pay for his classes. What kind of strength was that? Amir, what if I could help? My company has resources. We could sponsor your revalidation, pay for the exams, for the bureaucratic process. Amir looked at him with surprise. Mr. Harrison, that would be... I don't know what to say. But why? You don't even know me. Because the country needs teachers like you, because these children deserve to learn from someone who truly loves teaching, and because... Richard stopped, emotional. Because I'm learning that real value is in people, not things. Amir wiped the tears that ran down his face. Then I accept. Not for me, but for the children I will be able to teach. Thank you, Mr. Harrison. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. That night, Richard returned to his penthouse with the feeling that he had done something truly important. He hadn't closed a $1 million deal or increased his profits, but he had changed a life, and maybe, through Amir, he would change hundreds of others. But not everything was perfect. Richard's transformation was causing increasingly large waves in the company. Paul Miller and other executives began working against him, spreading rumors that Richard was having a nervous breakdown, that he was making emotional and irrational decisions that would ultimately destroy the company. Some shareholders began to question his leadership. There was a tense meeting where Richard had to defend every decision he had taken in the recent weeks. The numbers, he argued, were still excellent. The company remained profitable. But now it was also ethical. Ethics don't pay dividends, Paul said during a particularly heated discussion. Ethics don't conquer markets. Ethics don't turn a regional company into a global empire. Maybe not, Richard replied, tired of fighting. But ethics let me sleep at night. Ethics mean I don't feel disgusted when I look in the mirror. And if that means nothing to you, maybe you are the ones who need to reevaluate your priorities. The meeting ended without a clear resolution, but Richard knew he was at a crossroads. He could continue changing, becoming a better man, but he would likely lose support within the company. Or he could go, back to being who he was, securing his position but losing his soul in the process. That night he called Catherine. Catherine, can I ask you a question? Of course, Mr. Harrison. How do you do it? How do you keep believing in the good in people after everything you've been through, after how you were treated by people like me? There was a silence on the other end of the line. Then Catherine answered, her voice soft but firm. Because the alternative is giving up. And if I give up, they win. The bad people, the cruel people, they win. So I choose to believe. I choose to keep fighting. Not for me, but for my children. For the chance that their world will be a little better than mine. And if the world doesn't change? And if everything we do doesn't make a difference? But it does, Mr. Harrison. Look at me. My life changed completely because of you, and it's not just me. It's Amir, who now has hope of teaching again. It's Lily, who now believes her dreams are possible. It's every child in the scholarship program who will have a chance. They never would have had. How can you say that doesn't make a difference? Richard felt tears run freely down his face. "Thank you, Catherine. Thank you for not giving up on me." "You didn't give up on yourself, Mr. Harrison. You just needed someone to remind you that there was still goodness inside you." After he hung up, Richard sat in the dark of his living room, looking at the city lights. He had spent so much time building walls around himself, protecting himself from any emotion, any genuine human connection. But now those walls were crumbling, and yes, it hurt to feel again. It hurt to care, it hurt to see the suffering around him that he had previously ignored so easily. But it was also liberating. For the first time in decades, Richard felt truly alive. Not just existing, not just accumulating wealth and power, but truly alive. Connected with other people, with a purpose greater than himself. He thought of Lily, studying in the library even when she was tired. He thought of Catherine, working 12 hours a day and still finding the strength to be a loving mother. He thought of Amir, teaching for free even, after losing everything. These people had something all his money could never buy. They had purpose, they had love, they had hope. And now, finally, Richard had it too. The next day, he woke up with renewed determination. It didn't matter what Paul or the other executives thought. It didn't matter if he lost support or power. He was going to keep changing. He was going to keep growing. He was going to become the man Lily had seen the potential for him to be. He arrived at the office early and found a surprise waiting for him. On the door of his room there was a small vase with flowers and a note. He recognized Lily's careful handwriting. "Mr. Harrison, my mom says you are changing the world. I still don't know if I completely believe it, but I want to believe. Keep trying. With love, Lily." Richard held the note against his chest, moved. Those simple words from a 12-year-old girl meant more to him than any Entrepreneur of the Year award he had ever received, because they came from a place of truth, of genuine hope. He entered his office and looked around, the marble walls, the expensive artworks, the impressive view. All of that was still there, but now it looked different. It was no longer a monument to his ego. It was just a space he could use to do good. Richard sat at his desk and opened his computer. He had a lot of work to do. The scholarship program needed to be launched. Amir needed support for his revalidation. There were other people waiting for help, other lives that could be changed. And Richard Harrison, for the first time in his life, was ready to be more than a rich man. He was ready to be a good man. There was only one last test remaining, one last challenge that would determine if this change was real or just a passing phase. And that test was coming faster than he imagined. The test Richard didn't expect arrived on a morning in May, when the New York sky was particularly blue. That rare blue that only appears after days of rain washed the pollution from the air. He was in his office, reviewing the final details of the scholarship program that would be officially launched the following week when Margaret rushed in, her face pale. "Mr. Harrison, we have a situation. Paul Miller has called an extraordinary board meeting now." Richard felt a knot in his stomach. "He doesn't have the authority to call the board without my approval. He got signatures from 60% of the major shareholders. Sir, I think it's a coup. They want to remove you from the presidency." The world seemed to stop for a moment. Richard looked out the window at the city he had conquered, at the empire he had built. It could all end today. It could all be taken from him. And the question was, did it still matter? "Where is the meeting?" "The main conference room. They are waiting." Richard stood up, straightened his tie, and took a deep breath. "Then let's get this over with." The conference room was packed when he arrived. All the board members were present, along with Paul and other key executives. Expressions ranged from embarrassment to open hostility. At the center of the table, Paul looked confident, a small smile of victory already drawn on his lips. "Richard, thank you for coming," Paul said with false courtesy. "Please sit down." "I prefer to stand. Say what you have to say." Paul exchanged glances with the other board members. "Very well, let's get straight to the point. In recent weeks, your decisions have deeply concerned the shareholders of this company. Exorbitant salary increases, expensive social programs, donations to dubious causes. All of this without proper consultation with the board. Nothing I've done violates the company's bylaws, and the numbers remain excellent. For now, intervened Dr. Sylvia Richardson, one of the major shareholders, a woman in her 60s with impeccably styled white hair. But your actions indicate a dangerous shift in focus. This is a tech company, not an NGO. And can it not be both? Richard asked, his voice calm but firm. Not when one harms the other, Paul replied. Richard, you are having a breakdown. It's obvious to all of us. This sudden transformation, these emotional decisions, it all indicates you are no longer fit to lead this company. A breakdown, Richard repeated, a bitter smile on his lips. Is that what you call it when someone develops a conscience? We call it that, when someone starts throwing money away on sentimental projects while neglecting the interests of shareholders, Paul retorted. You promoted a cleaning lady to a managerial position without proper qualification. You are paying for a refugee's degree revalidation. You created a scholarship program that will cost millions with no guaranteed financial return. And why? Because a 12-year-old child said some pretty words? The room went silent. Richard felt anger rising but forced himself to stay calm. You want to know the truth? Yes, it was a 12-year-old child who made me wake up. A girl who, despite being born in poverty, has more wisdom and humanity than all of us put together. She made me see that I spent 51 years of my life accumulating wealth and losing my soul in the process. How dramatic, Paul mocked. But that doesn't change the fact that you're no longer acting in the best interest of the company. And the best interest of the company is what, exactly? Profit. Just profit. Without caring who we step on along the way. Yes, Paul slammed his hand on the table. That is exactly it. That is the reality of the business world, Richard. You yourself taught me that. Remember, you told me 10 years ago when I was starting here that there was no room for sentimentality in business, that you were either a predator or you were prey. That compassion was weakness. Where is that man? That man is dead, Richard said simply, and I don't feel sorry for him. Well, we feel sorry for him, Dr. Sylvia said, because that man built an empire, and this new Richard is about to destroy it. Motion proposal, Paul announced formally. Removal of Richard Harrison from the position of Chief Executive Officer for incapacity to perform his duties properly and for acting against the interests of the company and its shareholders. Richard looked around the table. Some board members avoided, his gaze clearly uncomfortable. Others stared at him with open hostility. He could fight. He could use all his resources, his influence, his contacts to keep his position. But for what? To continue in a place where his new vision was not welcome? Before you vote, Richard said, his voice echoing through the room, let me tell you a story. A few weeks ago, I met a girl named Lily. She is 12 years old, lives in a poor neighborhood in the Bronx, and her biggest dream is to have a computer at home, so she can study at night. She learns 3 languages on her own, gets top grades in school, and still finds time to help other neighborhood kids with their homework. Richard, this has no relevance, Paul began. Let me finish, Richard's voice thundered, and Paul recoiled. This girl told me something I can't get out of my head. She said nobody can be her mother except her mother, and that this is worth more than all the money in the world. Can you understand what that means? Silence. It means there are things that have no price, that real value is not in bank accounts or quarterly reports. It's in human connections, in the lives we touch, in the difference we make. And I spent 51 years without understanding that. Richard walked to the window, looking at the city below. I built this empire, yes, but for what? To die alone in a penthouse full of expensive things but empty of meaning, to be remembered as the richest man in the cemetery. What kind of legacy is that? A legacy of success, Paul argued. A legacy of conquering the impossible. No, Paul, it's a legacy of emptiness, of wasted opportunities, of lost humanity. Richard turned to face the board. You want to remove me? Fine. Vote. But know that you will be choosing profit over people. You will be choosing the easy way over the right way, and you will have to live with that choice for the rest of your lives. All very pretty, Dr. Sylvia said, but her voice was less steady now. But what about fiduciary responsibility? What about our investments? Your investments remain safe, profits remain excellent. The only thing that has changed is that now this company has a conscience. It has social responsibility. It has a purpose beyond enriching those who are already rich." Richard paused. "But if that is not enough for you, then I truly have no place here." The door to the conference room opened abruptly. Everyone turned, surprised. Margaret was there, and behind her, to Richard's shock, were Catherine, Lily, Amir, and other employees he had helped in recent weeks. More than 20 people crowded the entrance. "Sorry for the interruption," Margaret said, her voice trembling but determined. "But we thought you needed to hear this." "This is a private meeting," Paul protested. "Guards, remove these people." "No," Richard said, his voice firm. "Let them in. They have more right to be here than any of us." Catherine took a step forward, clearly nervous but brave. "Ladies and gentlemen, I don't know how to speak fancy like you. I don't have a college degree. But I know what it's like to work honestly and be treated as if I'm invisible, until Mr. Harrison changed. This has nothing to do with," Paul began, but Dr. Sylvia interrupted him. "Let her speak." Catherine took a deep breath. "I've worked here for 7 years. In that time, I've seen people being fired by email. I've seen people crying in the bathrooms because they couldn't pay their bills with the salary they received. I've seen so much cruelty disguised as efficiency, and I accepted it because I needed the job. But Mr. Harrison, he changed all that. Not just for me, but for dozens of employees. He is trying to do what's right, and you want to punish him for it?" Lily stepped forward, standing beside her mother. She looked directly at the board members, her eyes young but determined. "My mom taught me that character is what you do when no one is looking. Mr. Harrison could have kept being who he was. No one forced him to change, but he chose. He chose to be better. He chose to use his power to help, not to hurt. And that, ladies and gentlemen, that is true leadership." Amir stepped forward. "In Syria, I was a university professor. I taught the best and brightest students in my country. I lost everything when I had to flee. I arrived here with nothing, without hope. But Mr. Harrison gave me back my dignity. He gave me the chance to be a teacher again. How many of you have ever done something like that? For someone?" One by one, other employees spoke up. Stories of lives changed, of families saved from poverty, of dreams that became possible. And as they spoke, Richard saw expressions changing around the table. Some board members looked ashamed. Others moved, but not all. Paul stood up, red with anger. "This is ridiculous. This is emotional manipulation. We have a company to run, not a charity." "And what if we could be both?" The voice came from Dr. Albert Montgomery, one of the oldest board members, a 70-year-old man who rarely spoke in meetings. Everyone turned to look at him. "Paul, I founded this company along with Richard 25 years ago, and I'll tell you a secret. It wasn't for the money." "Albert," Richard said, surprised, "it was for innovation, for the possibility of changing the world through technology. But somewhere along the way, we lost that. We became just another company obsessed with profits." Dr. Albert stood up, leaning on his cane. "Richard, you are reminding us why we started all this. You are reminding us that companies are made of people, and that our success should benefit everyone, not just shareholders." "Albert, with all due respect," Paul began, but the old man cut him off with a gesture. "I've made my decision. I vote against Richard's removal. And more, I propose we double the scholarship program's budget. I will personally donate $5 million to it." The room exploded in murmurs. Paul looked stunned. Other board members began talking at once. Dr. Sylvia raised her hand, asking for silence. She looked at Richard for a long moment and then at the people at the door. Finally, she sighed. "I have 3 grandchildren, and sometimes I wonder what kind of world we are leaving for them. A world where only profit matters, where people are just disposable resources." She shook her head. "I vote against the removal. Richard stays." One by one, the other board members voted, some in favor of Richard, others against. When the voting ended, the result was clear. Richard had won. Not by a large margin, but enough. Paul was white with rage. "This is a mistake. All of you will regret this." He grabbed his things and left the room, slamming the door hard. After the room emptied, Richard was left alone with Dr. Albert. "Thank you," he said simply. Don't thank me. You reminded me why I started all this. Sometimes we need someone to show us that we've lost our way. The old man smiled. That girl, Lily, she's special. Yes, she is. You know what I find most incredible? She challenged you. A 12-year-old child challenged one of the most powerful men in the country, and instead of crushing her, you listened. That, Richard, that is true strength. That night, Richard organized a small dinner at his penthouse, not the kind of formal dinner he used to give, with expensive dishes and empty business talk, but something simple, intimate. He invited Catherine and her children, Amir and his family, Dr. Albert, Margaret, and a few other employees who had been affected by his changes. The penthouse that had always been a symbol of his loneliness and arrogance was now full of life, laughter, and genuine conversation. Children ran through the living room that had always been untouchably perfect. Home-cooked food shared space with designer furniture, and Richard, at the center of it all, felt happier than he ever had surrounded by empty luxury. Lily approached him in a quiet moment, when the others were talking animatedly. "Mr. Harrison, can I ask you something?" "Of course, Lily." "When we talked that first time, you were angry. Real anger. Why?" Richard thought for a moment. "I think because you touched something I had buried very deep, a part of me that still remembered what it's like to care about other people, what it's like to have empathy, and that scared me. And now, are you still scared?" "Yes, but it's a different fear. It's not the fear of feeling, it's the fear of going back to who I was before." He looked at the girl. "Lily, you changed my life. Do you know that?" She shrugged in a typical childish way. "I just spoke the truth. You're the one who decided to listen. Not everyone would have listened. I know. That's why you're special." She smiled. "You know what my mom told me? That people don't change overnight. But when they really change, when they truly decide to be better, nothing can stop them. Your mother is very wise. She's the strongest person I know." Lily looked at Catherine, who was laughing at something Amir had said. "She never gave up, not even in the worst moments, and now, because of you, she can finally breathe. She can dream. We can dream." Richard felt tears sting his eyes. "And what are your dreams, Lily?" "To study, to see the world, to learn everything I can, and one day, when I grow up, to do what you are doing, to help other kids like me, to give hope to those who have none. You'll make it, I'm sure of it. I know, but I won't forget where I came from, or who helped me." She looked at him with those intelligent, deep eyes. "Thank you, Mr. Harrison, for listening, for changing, for showing that it's possible to be rich and still have a heart." After everyone left, Richard was alone in his penthouse again. But now the silence was different. It wasn't oppressive or empty. It was peaceful. He walked to the balcony and looked at New York City, the city that slept and dreamed below him. He thought about everything that had happened in recent weeks, how a simple conversation with a girl had triggered a complete transformation in his life, how he had almost lost everything today, but in the end had gained something much more valuable. His phone rang. It was a message from Amir. "Mr. Harrison, I just received the confirmation. My degree has been revalidated. I start teaching at the university next semester. I have no words to thank you." Richard smiled and typed a response. "The gratitude is mine, Amir, for showing me that teaching is an act of love." Another message, this time from Dr. Albert. "Richard, I've been thinking, how about we expand the scholarship program to other cities? I have contacts in Washington, D.C., Los Angeles, Chicago. We can really make a difference on a national scale. Let's talk tomorrow. I love the idea." And then one last message from Lily. "Mr. Harrison, my mom is crying. They are happy tears. She said she never imagined life could be like this. Thank you for giving us back hope. Good night." Richard put away his phone and stood there, just breathing, feeling the night breeze, the smell of the city, the life pulsing around him. He had spent so much time dead inside, just functioning like a money-making machine. But now he was alive, really alive. It wouldn't be easy. Paul was still out there, probably planning some kind of revenge. Other executives still looked at his changes with suspicion. And he knew there would be more challenges, more attempts to make him go back to what he was before. But Richard Harrison was no longer that man. He had passed through the fire of transformation and emerged different. Not perfect, not without flaws, but better. Genuinely better. He thought about what he would say if he could go back in time and talk to the Richard of 2 months ago. That arrogant, empty man who believed money was everything. What would he say to him? Maybe simply this: listen to the people around you. Listen to their stories, their pains, their dreams, because somewhere among all those voices you ignored for so long is the truth you need to hear. And when you finally listen, when you truly hear, your life will change forever. Richard went back inside the penthouse and, for the first time in years, went to sleep with a smile on his face. Tomorrow would be a new day, a day to keep growing, to keep changing, to keep making a difference, a day to live with purpose. And somewhere in the Bronx, in a small blue apartment, a 12-year-old girl also smiled as she fell asleep. She had planted a seed of change in the heart of a man who seemed impossible to reach. And in doing so, she had changed not only his life, but her own, and so many others. Because that is the truth about transformation. It never happens in isolation. When one person truly changes, it creates ripples that touch other lives. And those ripples keep expanding, reaching further and further, changing the world in ways both small and large. Richard Harrison learned that real value is not in the things we possess, but in the lives we touch. That real success is not measured in bank balances, but in smiles, renewed hopes, and dreams realized. That an empire built on selfishness is empty, but a life built on compassion is infinitely rich. And while New York slept, preparing for another day of struggles and dreams, a man who had everything but had nothing finally discovered what really matters. And a girl who had nothing but had everything continued to be the light that guided not only her mother, but everyone lucky enough to cross her path. Because in the end, that is what we truly are, not the money we accumulate or the power we exercise, but the love we share and the difference we make in other people's lives. That is the real measure of a life well lived. And Richard Harrison, finally, was beginning to truly live.